Good morning all, good morning everybody. Welcome to the breakout session at the Government Analytics Forum 2017. Today we're going to talk about the need of citizen-centric government and how analytics is helping there. I am Bhavesh Madurai. I am the partner for cognitive solutions in US federal government for IBM Global Services. And I have with me today an eclectic and distinguished panel of executives in government and industry, and who are going to share with us their innovative thoughts on this topic.
Thanks.
And what we'll do is I'll introduce you. Got your table now.
She's going to get hell for this back at the office, by the way.
She's not sharing. Being high maintenance. You guys can you want to put the table in the middle? We can do it. We can do it.
Is that an ottoman?
In the middle.
Okay.
So we're just going to be, I'll introduce the topic a little bit, talk about what my perspective is, what our point of view is from IBM's point of view, and then I'll go around each of the panelists, and then we can talk about specific questions, and then I'll have about 10-15 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. Okay. So let's take a poll. Let's take a poll first of all. Show of hands, please, of how many of you are actually doing citizen-centric projects and programs that are driven by analytics and data. Few? Okay, interesting. Well, as I presumed, I think organizations today, we are all looking at the ubiquitous nature of data all around us, inside the organization and outside in the ecosystem. We cannot just live on internal data, but we are actually going to be looking at unstructured data, semi-structured data sitting in the ecosystem. The ability to harness that data, the hidden value of that data, using analytics and cognitive approaches is what is the opportunity today for government. As Susan mentioned earlier, the digital leader for IBM, in terms of how Kraft Heinz as an organization is looking at this, other industries are doing the same. There's a huge amount of opportunity for government to actually drive and get that data and get the value out of that data. And the approaches around cognitive, when I say cognitive, what do I mean, right? The ability to understand, reason, form a hypothesis, learn, and then interact. Interact with humans. So understand, reason, learn, and interact. This is what we mean by cognitive. And how cognitive is driving better decision making. So it's all about augmented reality rather than artificial intelligence. It's about augmented intelligence, helping a human to actually make a better decision so that human beings can make 20% of their time, which is focused on most difficult tasks, they can actually spend about 80% of that time now on the difficult tasks. And the 20% is done by that system, automated system. So that's what I mean by cognitive systems. And then how are these helping the reinvention for digital, right? How digital reinvention. So the three aspects that Susan mentioned was new focus on short-term, long-term priorities, things like agile, new ways to deliver by interesting approaches like POCs and prototypes, API-driven approaches. And thirdly, lastly but not least, it's about skills and expertise, honing a kind of center of excellence around building this kind of garage or a center of excellence, driving that kind of end-to-end visibility to get quick value of the use cases themselves. So with that preamble, I'd like to start with introducing each of our guests. So Amy, do you want to go and introduce yourself, please? And
yeah, sure.
A little about your role.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. So I'm Amy Wilson. I serve as a Presidential Innovation Fellow. If you guys aren't familiar with this program, it's we're entrepreneurs in residence for the government, and that sounds kind of like a weird name for people in the government, but we are brought in to start new things, sometimes to disrupt government. And so I'm serving my second year as a PIF, or we call it PIFs for short. And the first year, I really focused on, actually day 2, I was given an investment by GSA to come in and change the way we buy products, digital products in the government. So, what resulted was the first government-wide technology accelerator. We call the Digital Acquisition Accelerator. So we're literally changing hearts and minds to being agile, human-centered design, the approaches that, to have a data-driven approach to what we do. And then the tail end of last fiscal year, I was the lead of one of the leads of the White House Open Data Innovation Summit. So this was literally celebrating the 8 years of open data during the Obama administration. So we had a 2,000 person summit and about 8,500 people online, where we were really celebrating bringing everybody together. Everybody said it was like a homecoming of everybody who worked in the open data world. And one of the things I worked on there, and you can still see it, is the White House Open Data fact sheet. So it's a 20-page fact sheet, it's not a short read, but it talks about what is the impact open data had during that administration. So you can take a look at that. And then now what I'm working on is I'm working on this thing called the Better Government Movement. It's from the last administration, bringing together this idea of innovation. How do we create a better government through innovating? And I'm essentially taking this knowledge and building a toolkit that collects all of this great knowledge that is happening in the government and around government, and also community of practice. And third of all, an ambassadors program. So how do we actually scale, get people to evangelize innovation within the government? So that's just like a high-level perspective of what I do. And also, I also was a consultant beforehand, so I understand the world of the IBMs and Booz Allens of the world. So.
Very interesting. Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
Michelle, do you want to go next?
So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Michelle Causey. I am the Director of User Experience and Design in the Office of Online Services within the Internal Revenue Service. I have been with an agency now for about 6 years. I commenced my career in the Office of Online Services, serving in a number of capacities, such as a product development director, as well as director for the Portal Business Office, which pretty much houses a lot of our infrastructure components. And most recently, I've been serving in the capacity of UX director for the past year. My primary charge is to create and establish and cultivate an organization centered around human-centered design principles to implement service design methodologies throughout the service. I spent a fair share of my time working with stakeholders, both internal and external to the agency, to implement best practices for not only agile development, but service design in terms of understanding the psychology behind human interactions as we design and deliver digital capabilities. Our primary focus is on the future state initiatives for the IRS, which are taxpayer-facing endeavors, which include and are not only limited to irs.gov. We're doing a refresh of our website. We are establishing new capabilities, such as a secure online account feature, where taxpayers will be able to check the status of their account balance. We are also looking and experimenting with pilot operations, such as taxpayer digital communications, where citizens will be able to correspond with the IRS in a secure digital environment. And we're also looking at some additional capabilities to really streamline our legacy systems to provide those API capabilities so that we can provide better self-service for taxpayers, both from a mobile perspective as well as from an online digital product perspective, with our end goal being able to really increase voluntary compliance through digital self-service. And last but not least, as part of our service design efforts and engagement, cross-channel analytics plays a significant role as we look at the various channels from either walk-in centers, telephone engagements through IVR systems, as well as our engagement on the web to also include mobile. So I have a lot of experience, lots to share. I'm looking forward to the dialogue today. And
fundamentally, the user experience part to analytics, it's like jam with actually the bread, you know. Without the jam or the butter, you can actually not eat the sandwich. So it's that glue, how analytics solution can be actually used, it's applicable. So I'm really thrilled to learn more about that. I've been doing a lot of work with IRS, but particularly in that space around cognitive and analytics, how do I make it for better decision making? I think that's
absolutely. So without analytics, without research, without looking at the data, you know, and given the fact that we have declining budgets, we want to make informed decisions, evidence-based decisions that are rooted in fact and not just opinion. I think oftentimes when we create digital solutions, we may often get married to what we would like to see and not necessarily what the taxpayers or the citizens actually need and are interested in. And I can share some examples, but I want to allow Justin to be able to introduce himself.
Go ahead, Justin.
How's it going? I'm Justin Herman. So what I do for the General Services Administration is I lead the new Emerging Citizen Technology Program. What that means is that we work with all agencies in government and start identifying the business cases and the needs and the trends for emerging technology that we know that agencies have the case for, they have the desire to start investing, but no policies, guidance, roadmaps, or past performance can be relied upon about that. So right now we're leading the coordination across government to try to mainstream artificial intelligence for citizen services, virtual and augmented reality, our more traditional role in social technologies, and this summer we're going to be releasing the federal-wide blockchain initiative. So look forward to that. Also serve on the White House's National Science and Technology Council's subcommittee on machine learning and artificial intelligence. And also I wish I had an ottoman like that over here. You might have heard, actually the last speaker talked about a specific pilot that we're hosting right now, which is we're working with about 30 government agencies to explore integrating their public data into artificial intelligence smart assistants like Amazon Alexa, Microsoft Cortana, Google Assistant, Facebook Messenger chat, IBM Watson. So it's not just working with the agencies themselves on refining that, but working with industry and US businesses themselves to make that connection so we can truly develop these emerging technologies together. How I really got into this and passionate about it was actually a while ago. There was a particular disaster that happened in the United States, or an emergency situation, and we got brought in to help create a digital operations center. And what we found is we were able to track like 30,000 requests for help online a day through either websites, through tweets sent, across the board, phone calls. And what we found is that we were quickly able to create these wonderful feeds that showed the number of requests for help, but what was lacking is the ability to do two main things: to make it actionable and digestible. How can you translate this wealth of citizen interaction and through analytics make it so it is truly operational? And that was the challenge, that was the need that we saw. And so we knew we had to start moving the government forward on cognitive services, AI, whatever it is. It's not chasing the tail of emerging technology. It is truly, we have so much mission needs sitting on the table, and we have the data there. We've just got to work with it. And that's why we're open, and anybody here in the room who has solutions or wants to get involved with that, we have open invitation for it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Amy, around citizen-centric, how do you define citizen-centric, first of all? And how is it different from a government sector versus the commercial sector, and government in particular? What does citizen-centric really mean? And what approaches have you used to provide solutions there?
Yeah, so what I would say is citizen-centric is literally putting the citizen at the center. Hence the name citizen-centric. I have like this one slide. We don't have slides today, but I have one slide when I talk about what we do, and half of the slide is literally one side is the public, and the other side is government, and there's a line that goes between the two, and it's literally having a free flow of information and content and feedback between both the public and the government. That's obviously, we're not completely there yet, but that's the dream. That's where we want to be. And having a better relationship, fostering a better culture between these two groups. So that's how I would define that. And there's so many pockets of agencies, organizations that are doing this. But what's interesting is that they feel that they're doing it very much alone. They're not necessarily being able to share that with each other. So that's where the better government work that comes in is trying to bring those strategies up and shine some light on them, so that people can actually see, this agency's doing this over here. I'm not alone doing this over here. So that's something that's really important. A lot of people are doing so much great work, but people don't know about it. So I think we just need to we're bringing the community together to talk about it, and also how do we codify what the government means. And the last thing I'll say about this is that With the private sector, having worked in the private sector, what works in the private sector might not always work in the public sector, or needs a translation that happens, right? So what we're trying to do is to be that translator of something like lean startup, as I use an example.
Right.
When you say lean startup, to somebody in the government, they're like, oh, that's not for me, it's for startups, right? But the principles of that, of building, measuring, and learning from the experience is essential to what government does. So we're trying to move away from the word and the language we use into the principles, and trying to extract the principles that really work and should work across government.
Things like agile and
Yep, agile, human-centered design, lean startup, using new ways to acquire goods and services, because in a lot of ways the government does not actually make them in-house. They get contractors to come on board to do that. So how do we make sure and make people change their mindset to those things so that we can be better buyers of products? Right now, like, the government just doesn't, a lot of people in the government don't understand like what this means, so they just go and get somebody else to do it. But if they don't understand what it means, they're not going to be a good steward for that work.
And can I add to that? I was going to say, to expand, putting the customer first is definitely essential. For my agency, the diversity of constituents that we engage with on a regular basis means there is no one-size-fits-all approach. And it's really important for us to understand the demographic and look at the data, particularly since we have individual taxpayers, we have small businesses, large businesses, we have international stakeholders as well, not-for-profit organizations. We cannot construct digital self-service applications or digital solutions for a one-size-fits-all. So putting the customer first, or the citizen first, or the taxpayer first in this regard is really, really, really important, and understanding the analytics behind it. The needs of an individual taxpayer will vary greatly from a tax practitioner. And so you cannot approach it from a one-size-fits-all. So understanding the personas and the journey rooted in research at a macro level view and looking at the various engagement models is essential in order for the government to prove successful. And to Amy's point as well, with respect to iterative and agile development, I think what we are finding as an agency is that the return on investment is significant, particularly in an environment where we have declining budgets, where we are able to make informed decisions and deliver capabilities and products and services that are rooted in fact-based analytics, that are analyzed to the point where we understand what the pros and the cons are, and we're making those evidence-based decisions. We don't have to go and redevelop new products that taxpayers are not using. We are able to give the public what they're looking for, and so therefore we're expanding on a developed solution instead of burning down the house and rebuilding it all over again, which becomes a waste of resources. So we're able to iterate and test in an agile environment to make sure we're giving the public exactly what they're looking for.
That's wonderful to know. In that example, though, you still need to create that business sponsorship.
Absolutely.
The kind of overall vision, while still doing iterative, think big but implement small, right?
Right. So for our teams, I'll use our development process that we have right now for our online account solution. We have stakeholders that include the practitioner community as well as our business stakeholders who engage with, and they set all the business metrics and goals and objectives. And we're looking at like our call center operations, for example, as well, to see when we develop online capabilities, what the impacts are in the call centers, because calls are costly. In addition to that, we're working with our IT partners, right? Because as we're developing prototypes and talking to taxpayers in our national tax forums and conducting usability tests, we have a practice right now for accounts where we conduct usability tests, at least 2 times every 9 weeks in our sprints, where we're talking to taxpayers to get real-time feedback. We're able to understand the psychology around the decisions that they're making. We're able to determine whether or not the language that we're using is plain language and not vernacular germane to our organization and our agency, which is really huge. Because we can get hung up on very specific terminology that makes sense to my agency, but not to the average citizen, right? So we want to make sure that what we're delivering is capabilities that the taxpayer are willing to embrace and digest, and give them something that they're going to engage. And so that's where analytics is really important in terms of adoption rates and channel migration.
Wonderful, thank you. Justin, in terms of cognitive and AI, right? You've done a lot of work around both the open government and other things. So talk to us a little bit about what approaches around cognitive and AI, specifically in terms of augmented reality, artificial intelligence, specific use cases, some examples you can give us that
Well,
will
we can even back it
citizen-centric?
up from a little bit there. The idea of, wait, we're talking about that public services should be designed around the public that they serve. That's not exactly a provocative idea. And it shouldn't be a complicated, provocative idea. And history will not remember us kindly if we act like it's such. So what are those barriers? Like forget the words AI, forget about all this stuff. Who's familiar with the allegory of Plato's cave? Plato's Cave. Anyone philosophy majors? See, more people raised their hands about Plato's Cave than you did about you work in citizen-centric services, which I'm disturbed by. The whole idea of Plato's Cave is that you're in a cave. The fire is the real world. You think you're looking at the real world, but you're looking at the shadows of the wall. We are bound by a tyranny of analytics sometimes because we have access to so much data and so much information, you could essentially pull from it whatever you want. So rather than the increase in data and the increase of access to this information should mean we're making wiser decisions. But instead, if you let it get away from you, you're creating a greater and greater differential. So that's why it's like when we're talking about these things, and it's so easy to get hung up on the processes and to say, well, I have access to this technology or this service or this much data, and you are lost in the woods. We are all lost in these woods in that sense. Again, that's why forget about what you hear or you read about our work or what our drive is to implement machine learning in government. We're speaking purely from the mission and purely from that need to take what we already have at the table and to make it operational. So in specifics, I mean, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, you're going to see, like right now, we want to do rapid pilot programs. Like I talked about that thing with Amazon Alexa and stuff like that. That is just one little thing we hope to wrap up very quick as part of like a larger program. The entire idea is what's called the no wrong door approach to digital services and digital government, where we have augmentation and we're able to install an analytics backend. So whether you make a phone call to the government, which millions of people do, tens of millions of people do, whether you fill out a web form, whether you tweet, whether you know what I mean, use a chatbot or an Amazon Alexa or something that's installed directly in the system. There is no wrong way for a citizen to make a query or try to access their services, and we have one unified, augmented by machine learning that can make actionable and digestible no matter how it goes. There is no wrong door for citizens anymore to be able to access services. That is not the vision. Because I'll say this, and we're fond of saying this, may we live 1,000 years and not sit on a panel talking about the promise of tomorrow, what we damn well need to deliver for citizens today.
Yeah.
And so I promise you, and we want to work with you, we want rapid pilots, not that they're the end-all be-all. We are slowly but determinedly building up the foundation and capabilities united across government to get to that vision that we said with the no wrong door approach. That's where we're going with analytics. Now, how that's going to be implemented, I don't know. That's why we're here talking. That's why we're inviting. That's why we're doing this together.
See, one of the approaches about doing that is to kind of set up that garage or a factory kind of mentality around,
DevOps.
fail fast, DevOps.
DevOps.
Yeah,
DevOps.
DevOps.
It's like so much in this.
Yeah.
So I love DevOps, but oftentimes because I'm a career public servant, so I'm not supposed to know what DevOps and Agile are, which is kind of ironic. But believe me, we do. And the whole idea of, again, that assembly line, that mechanism, because it's the same thing we were talking about Plato's Cave. It's so easy to think that you have a data-centric plan or that you have a citizen-centric plan, and you could be so far from the mark. And yet you have all the information that you want that backs up the wrong decisions. That's why we've got to do, like, I don't do open source because we're supposed to do open source. It is out of sheer necessity because I need people coming in to be able to double check, peer review what's going on.
Sure.
It's
Absolutely.
like, and again, so a lot of times you hear these buzzwords and people get hung up and like, one of the things I like about this pilot we're doing is that people are participating because they have the need. And suddenly it's like, you open up the door, surprise, you just did something agile. Surprise, you're also open source now. And people are like, so that's I think the exciting part is that all these things that we talk about and we have panels about, we're moving in that space, but not because we're supposed to, but because we need to. And that's the purest intention that there is in public service.
And also something that's happening too is that as we've been kind of crowdsourcing information from the better government work, is that instead of having a siloed approach like agency by agency, it's really how do we go do cross-agency? How do we talk about problems that we're having, right? You know, what you're really hitting at is kind of like an early version of how do we tackle problems and across the government. And we want to go in that direction, and we're trying to put infrastructure in place so that we can do that, and we can have those conversations.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
he's
good.
really at the
The
forefront.
government-wide
Exactly.
approach, like let's talk about blockchain for a second. And if
Yeah.
you haven't checked out the demo of IBM for blockchain,
Yeah, you should.
do it.
You
because
guys
it's
should,
coming.
actually.
I've had to go to crypto anarchist conferences we're going into new territories here, but we've got to because
We've
there's
got
the
to.
need.
It's the largest production level hyperledger that you can actually go and try and test in production today. So you should
Yeah,
go and
please
try
do
out.
check it
Yeah.
out. But in the last week, so I've got 2 diabolical new interns. First, working with Federal Acquisition Services at GSA. They are opening up it's just incredible to be able to work
Wonderful.
with the minds over at Federal Acquisition Services on this. 2, we were at the Office of Global Partnerships for the State Department. Every day, we're at different agencies, and they're not saying, check this out. They're saying, we need this, and we need to work together on this. And so it's just it's a much exciting time, drinking way too much coffee.
You should have a bar now, a kind bar or something like that.
He has a
Try and
traveling
get
bar,
some
actually.
sugar.
That's why I'm
Okay.
trying to pick up meditation.
Switching topics now, let's go about a little bit of challenges. What challenges are you guys facing? Start with Michelle yourself in the industry. What challenges you're facing when you talk about approaches, human-centered design or analytics, and hurdles, right? And how are you overcoming those hurdles?
So right now, I would say my primary challenge has to do with culture shift. And change management. Particularly at our agency, historically, we've developed all of our technological solutions in a waterfall development methodology approach. We haven't really engaged the opinions of taxpayers for taxpayer-facing applications as frequently as we would have liked to historically. And we also have this thing called the filing season, which drives a lot of our development timelines. So, because we are a 100,000 person organization, a lot of what we do has to do with tax administration and our back-end systems. We have well over 400 disparate systems within a service. So historically, the IRS has looked at a very finite development window. So that's typically after filing season, April 15th, up till about October, November. That's your window of opportunity. And we had a very, very specific window for testing and a very specific window for release. And so culturally, trying to change the mindset of an organization to say, hey, we don't have to develop in that manner anymore. We can now embrace agile and iterative, and we're no longer constrained by that filing season timeline. And it's key, and we've had a lot of success stories around that, particularly around the relaunch of our Get Transcripts application as we made some changes to our secure access component to enhance security last filing season. I think we were able to demonstrate that through real-time iteration, working in sprints in a short window, in a DevOps environment, ironically, we have a standalone environment that's not
It
commingled.
doesn't have to be ironic.
Well,
It's not ironic.
It should be the norm, right?
Well, right, because we have a managed service, actually Amazon Web Services environment, where we do our prototyping and our development of our taxpayer-facing applications. We aren't using any PII, and it's not commingled with our back-end systems. So the integrity of our tax administrations is still maintained. But the flexibility of us leveraging this DevOps environment allowed us to engage the public, assess the analytics, look at predictive analytics where need be to look at what the potential challenges could be, and really talk about the behaviors as well for taxpayers and address issues real time so that we were able to deliver new capability during filing season for our applications. So that's a culture shift. And so what I'm doing is, we're working, as I said, establishing the new organization. We're establishing communities of practice. We're participating in forums such as this to network and to partner. We've partnered actually with you on the GSA Smart Assistant.
Nice.
Because who doesn't want IRS
Nice.
and more automated services?
Exactly.
Treasury, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
All right, we provided content on 50 questions that we received the most.
Everybody wants to work with IRS on this. Because it's one of the
It's a wealth of
obvious
data,
cases,
right?
yeah.
Right.
It's a wealth of data,
It's,
absolutely.
yeah, so much data.
Yeah, so to answer your question, I think it's changing the mindset and really getting actually taxpayers to engage with us. I think what I'm finding is that taxpayers actually get excited, believe it or not. And not just individuals, but even preparers, because we are acknowledging the pain that they are experiencing. We are trying to create and incite and innovate delightful experiences with the service. I think that's something that people say, the IRS is doing that? Yes, absolutely. Because if we provide better experiences in a secure environment, we, at the end of the day, increase voluntary compliance. And that's our primary goal and objective.
And enumeration as well, right? It's not just,
Exactly.
It's about filling up your tax in the right way, getting it right.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm still learning in this country, but Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, what I would say, and actually in our research that I've been doing over the past year and a half, 2 years, is, and I have the slide that says, technology is not going to save us, but culture will.
Absolutely.
100%. And it's interesting, it's ironic, we're going back to irony, is that both Justin and I sit on the same team, which is something we didn't identify earlier, but we sit in this larger group called the Technology Transformation Service out of GSA.
Right.
And it's called the Technology Transformation Service, but I went to our commissioner and I said, we're not in the business of technology transformation, we're in the business of government transformation.
Exactly.
You know, and we're in the midst of doing this big strategy right now of where do we want to go? How do we reorganize and think about what's next? Because he just joined right before the election, actually. And he was just exactly, that's exactly where we're going to. All of our research is going to that place. And so if you think about it, what we're trying to do is to do a culture shift, right? But the culture shift, and one of our 6 principles that we have for the better government movement is innovation is not a one-size-fits-all approach.
That's
kind of
right.
harkening back to your experience there. Another one is being data-driven and focusing on that as part of your story. But those 2 pieces out of the 6 principles that we have are ones that are really, really cornerstones of the approach, I think. And I mean, having the user at the center of our approach, it's 6 of them. So there's just focus on these different things. But I think that what's important is to make sure that there is this culture shift from the people internal to an agency to think
Absolutely.
about this new place, but also the culture shift from the citizen. It's really the government. It's the onus is on the government for us to change, and we can't expect the citizen to change. We just need to understand what the citizen does and how they interact with us.
Totally agree.
And that's important.
We've developed historically from the inside out, saying our technology will allow us to do this, so this is what we're going to provide. We need to change our thinking. We have to look the outside in.
Yeah.
What are the needs and the demands of the citizens and the constituents and the taxpayers, and adopt accordingly. And I think there may be some fear, because I think when you really engage with the public, you will learn that not everything has to be a massive change internally from a technology perspective.
Right.
There's other improvements that we can make.
Yeah.
Justin, in terms of challenges or hurdles, maybe I put a curveball here around security of data, right? So one is about this open government having this, but security in
I'm
today's
glad you
day and
bring
age.
it up. There's only 2 things I'm sure of in this world. One, Big Bang Theory is the worst show on television. But 2 is that, and I, been doing this for a fair bit, and there has not been such a time where so many things are at a tipping point.
Right.
And that there's so many options and there's so many opportunities, which means there's so many decisions to make. Now, one of the things that's important for us, it's not just rushing off and are we creating an Amazon Alexa skill? Are we doing this pilot or that pilot? The whole purpose of it, I don't care if out of this pilot not a single actual skill comes out of it. What we want to do primarily is build a roadmap. How's the responsible way to buy? What is the security? implications of this, because right now, again, none of this guidance exists. So what's really more valuable is even like having something from an individual agency, is that we're building the resources and guidance and policy recommendations that will allow all of government to be able to do so in a secure, privacy-laden environment. And that's the true challenge of it. Now, what's fantastic about it is, again, when we talk about these opportunities and options, is I forgot who first said is be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid. Agencies are being very bold right now, and organizations are coming to the table to meet it. I mean, normally the word we hear the most is no. From everybody, you know what I mean? I've been at GSA 5.5 years, and I've heard the word no a lot on things. People feel like they have to put the brakes on it. Traditional organizations are saying, we want to be part of this. We want to help. Yeah. How can we help with better privacy guidance? How can we help with compliance on it? It's like a boulevard of unbroken green lights, which again, now to quote Spider-Man, great power comes great responsibility in agencies, because we have the responsibility with all these options ahead to do this the right way.
Absolutely.
And that also makes it exciting.
Okay, wonderful. Let's talk about a budget now. We all know that it goes only in one direction, right? Say downward. Right? So from a budget perspective, how have you folks actually approached cognitive or analytics or these kind of prototypes and POCs and gone around that problem? Amy?
Okay, so budget-wise, so one of the things that especially an executive order that came out at the beginning of this year is like efficiencies and effectiveness is something that's really we need to build. And just like an in comes the better government movement, we actually are saying, okay, this is now like the value proposition for us is like incredibly present because there's this necessity. And what's interesting, what I'm finding is that I'm talking to the smaller sub-communities that are there that for example, I was at Design in Government last week, and in that community, they're already coming together and saying, what do we all agree on when it comes to design? What does design in government mean? How are we pushing this forward, right? So that's very heartening for me because it's going to make my job easier, hopefully, because they're already collecting together. But what I'm doing is to say, where is innovation happening in the government? This is a one-stop place. And not only are we doing that, we're crowdsourcing it, we're getting feedback from the people who are going to be using this, which are the people in government, right? And using these strategies. And we are trying to find out what is that journey that they need to go on? Where would they go for that information? And how can they get to the information that they need in the fastest way? It's not necessarily saying we're just going to throw up a bunch of stories and call it a day. It's really helping them have that journey together with us. So so going back to the budget thing, so the budget, because we need efficiencies and effectiveness, the budget, it just makes an imperative for us as the budgets are concerned. So, and then also just trying to just bring together and have conversations. It just comes down to it.
So business cases, how do you go about creating business cases, Michelle?
So depending on the initiative, business cases are a bit of a challenge currently. And the reason why I say that is because we have to really identify the correct performance measures as it relates to success.
Right.
And not everyone agrees on performance measures per se. At the end of the day, yes, we want to collect dollars, right? Because it's for the IRS. But success for my organization may be different than success for the IT organization, may be different than the business organization. So right now what we're looking at, to echo Amy's point, is effectiveness and efficiency, and make the decisions that are most cost effective for the organization, giving us the biggest return on investment so that we can reallocate resources to work on more complex tax matters. Budget-wise, also to Amy's point, we do a lot of crowdsourcing initiatives. We had the Tax Design Challenge last year, where we leveraged capabilities and insight from private industry as well as from government entities to look at increasing or enhancing the performance of IRS.gov, as well as the account application, coming up with innovative ideas. So that way we're not wasting resources, if you will, on development of items or digital solutions that the public is not interested in consuming. In addition to that, we have a new crowdsourcing initiative called Innovate IRS, where we're looking at finding new ways to expand capabilities as well. And this is required because of the budget situation. You know, how can we be effective? How can we be efficient and make the most of our resources from crowdsourcing initiatives as well as doing those business cases to really articulate the return on investment? And I think now that we've had several success stories with Account, with the relaunch of Get Transcripts, and now as we're about to rehome our irs.gov webpage and do the refresh, which is scheduled to launch this August, I think we will see increase in adoption, and we will look at the return on investment, and that will gain or have other stakeholders be willing to embrace the development methodologies that we're using.
Wonderful.
If I could,
Justin.
so regarding budget, agencies are being asked to do far more with less.
With less.
And that's something that we are ready to embrace. When we talk about how we can do that, I mean, you talked about budgets decreasing. I have zero budget. This program, the Emerging Technology Program, exists to unite agencies using pre-existing resources and rededicate them in new ways to be able to get more with what's already on the table.
Right.
Yep.
That is a success right there. That's something that all agencies should be proud of, that they're part of it.
It's very encouraging.
When we talk about the working together, again, it's like when agencies are asked to do more with less,
Sure.
these are the ways that it's not just going to be done. We truly will get better programs out of them. And so that's something that is welcomed, and it's almost,
Absolutely.
in ways, it's an opportunity to show what we can do with emerging technology and really fulfill that promise.
Right.
Wonderful.
And also connected to that too, like, so we have another thing in our portfolio called Open Opportunities.
Yeah.
So if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's essentially it's a micro-tasking platform where people can spend 20% of their time, if they get their supervisor to say yes, anybody in the government can work on these projects. So you can put out, say if you want to have somebody work on emerging technologies, you put that out there, and then people come back and say, I'd like to work on this, right? And so that is actually, the things I'm finding is like, I'm doing this, all of this, I am like the full-time resource, but I'm doing this all with volunteer labor, right? And their 20% time. And so like it is, and it's like, and the way for this to be sustainable in the government, because there are cutting budgets, there are slashing things, we need to have things like open opportunities and enhance that and bring people together to do stuff that they're excited about. They come into my sessions and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so innovative in these sessions because I get to workshop with this, and that fuels them. That's the motivation that they get and the satisfaction they get out of their job.
When we're talking about the scope of this is, so Amy has her communities, interagency, and we talk about connecting people. Like my program connects 1,500 federal workers across all agencies in government.
Fantastic.
When we're talking about the scope of it, this isn't just like one-off meetings and stuff.
Right.
We have everything from training, workshops, pilots that connect. Just on the AI, VR, and social tech side, and then soon blockchain, 1,500 federal workers. And this is not the only ones. That's just 3 of 16 interagency tech communities that bring together about 10,000 federal employees. So when we talk about the reach, when we talk about that level of collaboration, we say it's government-wide, this isn't just some like ad hoc thing of who showed up in the room that day. This truly is, as Amy said, a movement.
And mission-driven. It's all mission-driven.
Oh,
so
yes.
It's three words, right? So bringing it all together, bringing people together, efficiency, effectiveness,
Efficiency, effectiveness.
right? So the key messages.
Yeah, and at
So-
the end of the day, it's at the heart of public service, right? We're all public servants because we want to improve the federal government. We
'Cause we're
want
gonna
to
be using
serve
it.
the community.
Yeah.
And so with that, it's necessary for us to collaborate and communicate and share those lessons learned and share information. And I think that's evidenced by here today based on the conversation that you're
Wonderful. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you.
I'd like to turn out to the audience now for any questions, please. Go ahead, ma'am. Wait for the mic. Yeah.
I had a question and a comment. So earlier on, you talked about the business case, how difficult it is in terms of resources. But I wanted to flip that on the outside and say, as a citizen, if you were to look at how productive you could make the citizen by, for instance, taking that treasure trove of data that the IRS collects, putting that into a tax return, and just letting the citizen validate what is already collected by the government, rather than making them re-enter and duplicate data and create more difficulty for the citizen. That productivity that you create among the US citizens could then be redeployed in other ways. And in addition, a lot of citizens go to the tax preparers because it's so complex to create, the tax returns. So that
Make it easy.
savings to the citizens themselves is a great ROI for the government to
No,
showcase.
totally agree, and it's something that we are evaluating and we are taking into account. When we're talking about business cases, I'm speaking more directly for the agency. Getting the agency to shift their thinking, to look at their productivity to the citizen, is part of that culture shift that we spoke of. So, and it's not just with individual taxpayers, it's also with the preparers. They come with their own separate, unique challenges in terms of being able to see what's more productive for them. They too have difficulties waiting on hold sometimes to get tax matters resolved if they have to make a phone call to the service, particularly if they have an inventory of 40, 50 plus individual taxpayers that they're working with. And so that is something that we're definitely looking at.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I've seen some of what they're working on and what people are doing, and the entire idea of, like, when you're shopping on Amazon or something, you make a purchase or you're looking at something, and then based on data, like 70% of people were also looking for this. So it brings it to you. So the idea is, whether it's a website, call center, whatever, is the minimum amount of input possible from the user and the maximum benefit derived from it, things pulled to you. And this is the things that are being developed right now that are so exciting, and we've had piloted and built. So again, that's good to check out.
Yeah, just a commercial, H&R Block and Watson around.
There's also something that's interesting too related to this, is that there's one of the things that, especially with data and IRS data and things like that, is the authenticity of that data.
Exactly.
And interesting, I'm waiting to the end to say this, but I was a product manager on account before I before I worked over on this, so I know a lot of the things you're saying. Is like, I know IRS very well. But what is interesting is that authenticity of data, like, we want to make sure that data is verified. And so that is one of the biggest hurdles. And one of the things that just was launched a couple months ago was login.gov.
Yes.
So that one person, this was something that USDS, 18F, and PIFs came on board to kind of tackle this problem, is that you have one login, you can have one login, and then that can get shared across every federal government agency.
Yeah.
And that is the first start, but I guarantee you on that roadmap is something of like, how can we have APIs so that information can be shared across agencies and you don't have to do that. But like, the government moves in so much slower than regular industry does, and for a lot of reasons, because the security of that information,
Exactly.
it's on our shoulders to make sure that everything is secure, like all those tax records.
Yeah.
Absolutely, the security and the integrity of the data
I've got
are
time
key.
for one last question. Quick
All right,
comment.
well, just one point is, so we're talking about citizen-facing stuff right here. With Frank Conkle as my witness, we don't go into meetings without somebody being like, when are you going to pivot and bring this to the federal workforce itself?
Wow.
And so I think what we see right now is every panel and conference you go to talking about citizen services, that truly is leading the way in government, in how we're working, what those interactions are, and we're already going to then start moving into next, revolutionizing and making better the federal workforce itself. So when you had brought up and we talked about, it's not just that interaction with taxpayers, but also with the providers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The points on this, the things we're talking about today are going to be things at your desk itself at work. And that truly is recognition, I think, that this is working. And it's so hard. You scratch the surface and you just saved the government $7 million. It can't get worse. So it can only get better, and it's going to get better. It's an exciting time.
Wonderful. One last question. Go ahead.
Well, I think she answered already, but I was asking about Amy's login.gov and what the status was. He kind of covered it a little bit, but that's what I wanted to find out more about. Login.gov.
Yeah.
You want to answer?
Can,
So next question?
yeah.
One more question here.
Cool, I'll be
Next one.
really quick. I was just curious, for Michelle, how UX factored into the IRS.gov relaunch that you guys are going to do. Maybe you can talk more about that. And then for the two panelists, I was curious about the coolest or more like most surprising partnership you guys have been part of recently. that
Hiring
was-
these two interns over here, definitely.
with the exception of the interagency partnership, I guess.
So real quickly, on irs.gov, it's a phased approach. We are migrating our web content management system from OpenText to Drupal. We have done a number of user studies. First and foremost, we're looking at improving our information architecture as well as our taxonomy so that we can have the appropriate metadata structure in order to support future technologies and AI, such as Alexa and so forth. We recognize that these disruptive technologies are going to be critical to our success, so while we're not 100% there yet, we are working on it. We have done a first pass at doing a redesign from a look and feel perspective, and that is coupled with our branding and marketing strategy for the service. So we're looking at new iconography, we're looking at a new organization of the site, be it role-based or task-based. I think many of you now, if you go to irs.gov, it may be difficult for you to find some very basic information. We're trying to make that experience more intuitive. And most importantly, we are looking at the overhaul to deliver a mobile responsive website and also content adaptive, so that in addition to plain language, depending on whether or not you're on a tablet or a smartphone or on a desktop or a laptop, that we can streamline that content to give you what you need when you need it.
Okay, wonderful. Justin, do you want to just respond?
I think the unsung hero of innovation in government itself is these interagency communities that we keep referencing. Because let's be honest, when an agency is part of a community, now they have access to resources, they have access to networks, they have, you know what I mean? They have all this brought to them, so they're not recreating the wheel. It's the most cost-efficient way of performing innovation. They don't credit the community. It's like, you know what I mean? Because that's their win. You hear about it when you're celebrating that agency's win, as is proper. But what is empowering and helping these agencies and stuff are these networks, and we rarely talk about that. And again, as a result, they often get overlooked or not supported or taken for granted in that way. So I'd ask anybody who's interested in these things to check out these interagency digital communities, see what you're doing to learn about them, how you can help them, host an event for them, bring them together, because again, just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean it's not ever present. But it's like, GSA's best wins are not our wins, because our job is just to support the best we can other agencies. And these interagency networks, some of which are not run by GSA, is all about the ideas and the leadership of people across government. And that truly is an overlooked unsung hero or heroine.
Your LinkedIn profile talks about these 4 or 5 communities. I think
I won't shut up about them because the whole thing is I want people to know, because the other thing is when there's that acceptance, then agencies know they can go to it and they know it's there for them.
Sure.
So the more that we talk about it and the more that we tout it, the more people know that I don't care if you're a 20-person team or you're a 1-person team and you feel isolated alone within the bureaucracy, you're never alone, because all of us are here together.
Great.
Yeah, I think a key component that you have with that too is the idea. It's almost like support group, mini support group too, which is so important to the process as we go forward. So
I'm between you and lunch at the moment, so this is a very quick question, 30 seconds. Do you have any question?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of work in a legacy government organization.
Don't we all?
I think the biggest barrier is to achieve a shared mindset in terms of value of analytics, human-centered design, evidence-based decision making. What would be your best approach to achieve that shared mindset?
Can I interrupt there and be very rude, actually? Can you do a one-to-one response?
Yeah.
I just want to
Let's
close the session. Big round of applause for our panelists here. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
thanks, guys.